Welcome into Betting Pitch number 217. I'm your host, Real_G Warner, and this is the Bundesliga season preview futures best bet episode. So this will be the last of the top 5 European soccer leagues as the Bundesliga gets fully underway with match day 1 starting this weekend. We had the Super Cup last weekend with RB Leipzig going to Munich and knocking off Bayern Munchen. But we're going to go through each of the teams, trying to give you an idea of what to expect from them coming forward into the season, and then go through what is available for futures odds to come up with the best bet that we will ride for the next 6 months or something of that nature, and hopefully get paid at the end of the season. Most of the time, I'm looking for plus money type of underdogs to finish in Champions League positions or maybe to get relegated or something of that nature. Likely won't see anything odds on, but I think it's worth the potential long haul. And yes, tying up money for a long time if you can find some value, as futures have been pretty good to me the last few seasons, and I will try to keep that going again here. If you're on YouTube, please hit subscribe. If you're on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, please leave a 5-star review, as that would really help me in the search bar history, whatever we call it. If you are not a Patreon subscriber just yet, I highly recommend checking out my Patreon account, patreon.com/Real_G Warner. You can get direct access to me, my leads across all the sports, so you're not having to worry about purchasing packages by sport as you would on other places. You can interact with me throughout the day as my write-ups are posted, and I notify everyone when plays are locked in. All you got to do is get the Patreon application, download it to your phone, wherever, turn on notifications, you get up to the second updates, and my patrons will tell you, or my patrons, excuse me, would tell you it's a price that is very reasonable. So go check it out, patreon.com/thereal_G Warner. So like I said, we'll have an ultimate best bet end of show. Just like I've had one for each of the leagues so far, some off to a good start, some off to a better start, and we'll end up getting to that. But all lines quoted in this podcast are courtesy of betonline.ag, my favorite place to get my bets down early. Reduced use is offered on almost every game you want to bet right up until game time. Please follow the link found in the podcast description to fund your account and use the promo code GW50 to receive a 50% match bonus up to $1,000. So now that we have a little bit of extra money in your account, let's start with it looks like SV Darmstadt. They are the bottom least valuable club in the Bundesliga, currently just south of 29 million euros on transfer market, which I think is if you got a better place to look for squad values and player values and things of that nature, please let me know. But I do believe that is the best spot to go. And they are, let's see, just short of 29 million euros. So a very, very small club compared to Bayern at nearly 1 billion euros. So big discrepancies, as you'll see in a lot of these sports leagues. You probably say that Luton Town in the English Premier League is even a bigger underdog potentially when they go visit either Man City or Arsenal, who are somehow worth a little bit more in squad value. But so looking at Darmstadt, they are they're runners up from the Bundesliga 2. Hamburg were unable to get through the relegation playoff with VfB Stuttgart. And so we only had 2 teams come up, but that's usually not a great sign, because the team that just survives the relegation playoff does not always stay up the next season, as we saw with Hertha Berlin last season. And they're still a pretty big club in the grand scheme of things. So that was a pretty big drop for them. But honestly, that's one of my favorite things about European football, is that there is relegation, and it makes everyone have to perform, and you cannot tank, unlike American sport. So Torsten Lieberknecht is the manager for Darmstadt, and he has been in the job since 2021. So been there a while. That's good for continuity. Departures, they lost some players to Augsburg, which is a very low budget club, so it doesn't seem to mean much. It doesn't seem like there's anything there that is really disappointing. They brought in a center back from let's see, that is from Dusseldorf, Fortuna Dusseldorf in I think they're in the second division, Schweizerliga in Germany. So there's some good talent there, and they've been in the Bundesliga for recently. But a center back paid 2 million there, paid 1.8 million for Fraser Hornby from Stade Reims, who I don't really remember as center forward from the French league. So that's not saying much. They also took Luca Pfeiffer on loan from Stuttgart, who's a very rarely used striker, more of like a substitute 85th minute type of guy, come in and try to head the ball in when they needed something. Also, some free transfers from Nuremberg. We have Fabian Nürnberger. What a name. Very appropriate for the club he used to play for, and Andreas Muller from another club that I don't know, but another free transfer. So it doesn't seem that Darmstadt have a lot of money. So they're going to have to really play as a unit together, keep what they're doing. Finishing a runner-up last season makes me feel like they should be a heavy favorite to go down. There aren't a ton of names I know on this roster, I'll admit, and I expect them to be a gigantic underdog in almost, certainly when they go to Bayern Munich, but I mean, even against the top half of the Bundesliga, it seems. There are a lot of clubs that are barely surviving financially, so it maybe is not that big of a stretch from them at the bottom to other teams that will be fighting relegation, but they will likely be in that fight just based on seeing how low the squad value is. But then we go to Heidenheim, who were last season's Schweizerliga champions, and I don't know if they call it Meisterschale because it's not the top division, but anyway, they are just north of 29 million euros, with the next leap to Bochum at 52 million euros, which is still a very poor club compared to Bundesliga standards. I think they were in the 40s last season coming into the year, and FC Köln are all the way up at 94 million euros, the next fourth from the bottom. So we got 28.9, 29.15, up to 52, but then up to 94. So there's a very clear gap between clubs, especially the two most recently promoteds, up to Bochum, and then Bochum up to FC Köln. I mean, it's a huge gap. So that's not a great sign for a really competitive bottom of the league, but we've seen Bochum stay in the league for a couple of years now, so we'll see what happens there. I'll go to Heidenheim next, who were in the relegation playoff, I think a couple seasons ago, lost to FC Köln. Hamburg were in it the last two seasons, but Heidenheim were, I think, able to stay up on the last day, and then in some miraculous comeback fashion. Frank Schmidt is their manager. He's been there since 2007, which is, I mean, that might even be testing Christian Streich type of tenure for SC Freiburg, who I'm wearing the kit of right now as we speak, or as I'm speaking. Good to have a manager there for a long time. In terms of departures, all on free transfers, it looks like. No one to leagues with, or to teams with logos that are in this division. So let's see what they've brought in. They brought in a center forward from Schalke, Marvin Pieringer, who was not on Schalke last year that I remember. Got a free transfer from a club I've never seen before, paid $500,000 for Tim Searsleben, a center back from Wolfsburg who was not playing. Aaron Dinci on loan from Werder Bremen, seems to be a fairly decent name. Younger player, if I remember correctly, center forward. And they also have another free transfer and a second striker. So not a lot has been done with the squad. They got blasted in the relegation playoff against Köln, I think 3 seasons ago, if memory serves. Not a great sign for their defense moving up, but they're going to try their best. Similar story to Darmstadt, who I just spoke about. They're going to be fighting to stay in the league. It looks like they've done a little bit better business. I mean, Dinci is 21 years old, worth 1 million euros. It's pretty low, but seemed like to have some hype when he's brought on the field as a substitute or on the pitch for Werder Bremen last season. This is probably one of his chances to go prove himself. We'll see if that happens. The rest of the squad, though, don't know that there's a lot here. Signing randoms from other Bundesliga sides that didn't really ever. I mean, I watched almost every Bundesliga match last season. It's one thing I try to do is watch all the matches. So I don't have huge expectations for them, unfortunately. Next, I'll move to Bochum, who were an incredible story last season. Sacked their manager, who had done such a great job to keep them in the league when no one really thought they would a couple seasons ago, and then went on a great run. We're still an awful defense away from home. I don't know that was necessarily changed under Thomas Lech, who I think was a goalkeeping coach, which usually you wouldn't think that would translate to a really good manager. But I mean, Julian Lopetegui is another success story as a goalkeeper turned manager. So maybe that's worked. He got appointed in early of 2022, late September, stayed on for the whole season and has his contract going to the end of this season. So we'll see how that goes. In terms of departures, Gerrit Holtmann left, but he was kind of in and out of the lineup due to injury. Konstantinos Staffelidis was in that lineup for sure, fairly often. Jonas Horn has left. going down a division to Nuremberg, and then other names I don't really know that I've seen. They brought in a center back from Red Bull Leipzig, it looks like. Salzburg, excuse me, in Austria, one of the Red Bull I guess minor league systems essentially. But for 600,000, that's a fairly big purchase for Bochum, which is saying something. Also have a free transfer and a midfielder from and a left back from two teams I don't know. Paid 750,000 for a left back, so maybe that was to replace Staffelidis, who's moved on. They also have Felix Passlack, a right back, a free transfer from Borussia Dortmund, but I remember him being a disaster whenever he came in for Dortmund. It was basically because they had no one else healthy to play the position. So not sure they've done too much. Certainly their older team has gotten older as well. They have Zola and Hoffman, both above 30 now. So we'll see how that goes. Lys Mousset coming in from Nîmes in France is interesting. Formerly a Ligue 1 squad. I guess he was always owned by Bochum, but was on loan at Nîmes last season. So we'll see what he does. He ruptured his Achilles, though, so we'll see when he returns. Looks like end of this 2023 calendar year. I don't know about that. I'm happy to see Christopher Antouyage still there. Big left, I mean, not a big guy, but very pacey guy, but got a big arm somehow for throw-ins, which has been really important to them. They're essentially going to try to muck up all these match plays as physical as possible. I would imagine that Bochum have a big upper hand on the two teams that have been recently promoted. And if they found themselves in a relegation playoff, that would not be a disaster. I am a little bit concerned about Anthony Lucia, their captain, defensive midfielder, who seemingly, when he misses matches, their defense goes out the window completely. And he's 37 years young. So that is not great, especially playing in a league that's going to be very physical, and he's going to have to be out there. And I honestly have seen firsthand how bad things have gone when he's been injured. I also have Manuel Riemann, their goalkeeper, who just screams at people the whole day. I remember even seeing some of the coverage last year telling like maybe if he focused on himself a little bit more than yelling at his teammates, that might help. But that's an interesting state. Bochum, I think, are probably going to be in that relegation discussion for a lot of the season. But ultimately, if they finish third to bottom, they still got a chance to save themselves against the third place finisher in the Schweizer Liga. So next I'll move to FC Köln, who's very surprising to me to see that valued at only 94 million euros. They're in the Europa Conference League. I want to say last season did not perform well in it and struggled to balance two competitions. But it does make me worry that there's some trouble brewing in that club because they're one of the biggest. They have one of the biggest fan bases out there. Stefan Baumgart's still around and really revitalized an FC team and got them into European competition, though it was the lowest of the three. But was a big deal. And then last year did not do very well, but happy to see him still around. Skiri has left for Eintracht Frankfurt on a free transfer. That hurts. Jonas Hector retired, their captain, who I don't know that they wanted to retire. Andre Duda has left for Hellas Verona. So those are three names that are pretty important. A captain, probably the most important player on the FC Köln's roster was Elias Skiri, who I believe is Tunisian, I want to say. And he's gone. Duda was in and out. They finalized the transfer of Julian Chabot from Sampdoria, who went down to Serie B, so that wasn't huge. They did bring in Luca Waldschmidt on loan, who's been all over Germany, plus played for Benfica, formerly of Sports Club Freiburg, as I'm wearing their jersey. Brought in Jakobs Christensen, don't know him. Leard Pacarada, don't know him either. Looks like those are from smaller clubs in Germany. Also brought another right back from Belgium, I'm thinking from Genk. So we'll see. That's not a lot of huge investments. Certainly lost some important players. When I think of Cologne last year, they could not score goals, and I don't know that that's necessarily going to change. They were pretty successful with counter pressing and really just pressing high up the pitch. Certainly leaves them open for puncture wounds, to say the least. But it looks like they have two center forwards injured in Florian Dietz and Stefan Tigges, who are basically the same player. I think big centers that try to head the ball in. Davy Selka is still playing. It looks like Mark Uth has come over, and Luca Waldschmidt, as we mentioned, on loan. Jan Thielmann also got an injury flag. He's expected back in October. They're dealing with a lot of injuries. Looks like Florian Kainz has moved into the captain role, which he's a very dependable player. Husin Basic is there. Lubicic. I mean, there's still plenty of names here. They haven't lost as much as I was worried about when I saw that number. But they're going to have trouble really replacing their great central defensive midfielder in Elias Skiri. And we'll see how that does, because he was kind of the N'Golo Kante type of player for this team and was able to kind of fill two positions with just one body. So I'm a little bit worried about them, and I'm especially concerned about their financial situation. And next, I'll jump up to, looks like we'll go to Werder Bremen, one of the northernmost clubs, just short of 100 million euros. And they were incredible last year, pulling out games out of their what's late matches. I don't think it was deserved. Ole Werner, their manager, 35 years old, looks like he's 55, and maybe the season did age him quite a bit. But Werder Bremen, one of the biggest historical clubs in Germany, but they have not been the same financial place for a couple of years now. They went down to the Schweizer Liga and then came right back up, which is important. But that's about the end of what I can say that's really nice about them, really, because their offense has been a joke for 3 seasons now. It was a joke last year. Without some late ridiculous comebacks, I feel like they would have been in the relegation fight. So they're a team that I'm looking to really struggle this season, though fortunately there are 2 clubs that don't even look like they're trying to stay up based on how little money that's been spent at the bottom of the Bundesliga. But when I look at departures, they lost left back Lee Buchanan to Birmingham City, it looks like. Nicolas Schmidt has left for Toulouse and their European aims. Fabio Chiarodia to Borussia Mönchengladbach for $2 million, and Yannick Engelhardt to the Sports Club Freiburg that I'm wearing, plus Aaron Dinci, as I mentioned, on loan to Heidenheim. So they brought in some money. In terms of what they've spent, they brought in Naby Keita, center midfielder from Liverpool, who probably is well known by most of the audience, though wasn't really playing at Liverpool. Certainly will improve that midfield, but I'm not sure how much. They spent 2 million euros on Senelinen from Union Saint-Gilloise. It's always a tongue twister for me. Union Saint-Gilloise from Belgium, who were really good in Europe last season. So we'll see how he does performing at this level. Also, David Konaki, I think he's Polish, from Fortuna Dusseldorf on a free transfer. So they haven't spent any money. They did bring in a pretty good accomplished midfielder from Liverpool, is on the downside of his career. Spent 2 million euros on a midfielder also from Belgium. So, I mean, not a lot has been put out there. We'll see how the attacking tandem of Marvin Dusch and Niklas Füllkrug does, as both are now approaching 30 years old. Dusch at 29, Füllkrug at 30 now. Füllkrug did play for Germany in the World Cup because he was scoring a ton of goals. Literally the opposite treatment that Iago Aspas got from Celta de Vigo in Spain, but he didn't do much, and there was a reason why they didn't really go to him until it was so desperate, and maybe it's part of why the German national team has been struggling so much. But it seemed pretty settled with some depth up top, but how do they really find that depth or use that depth is a big question. Naby Keita with an injury designation is not good. Tear in the abductor muscle, that's bad. That hurts a lot. They also have, looks like Jan Manuel and Boom, 23 years old, has muscular problems. That's not great. So basically they brought in some players, and I'm not really sure how much is going to be available. That's especially damning. I don't know really what to say. Mitchell Weiser was probably the best player for Werder Bremen last season. He needs to be protected and needs to be available. That's certainly important. I think when I look at the rest there, I mean, Marco Friedl is still there, captain, Austrian, only 25 years old, and formerly played for Bayern Munchen, I believe. Plus Yuri Pavlenka, their goalkeeper, who's a couple spots down the depth chart for the Czech Republic national team, but has been there for a while, has tons of experience. The problem is a lot of that experience is not really shown because he makes a lot of big mistakes. So Werder Bremen, I mean, honestly, they were a team I thought were going to get relegated last year, or if they didn't have that big start. And they're a team I want to look to bet against because I don't believe in their offense whatsoever. And I feel like their midfield, they tried to strengthen. And with older players, they're already going to miss Naby Keita, who seemed to be the biggest name they brought in. Next, I'll move to Ein FSV Mainz, who are formerly Jurgen Klopp's squad. Thomas Tuchel, I think, as well, came through there. And they're worth more than 100 million euros, 116 and change. And they're a good squad that played very well last season. They have maintained their manager. Let me make sure I clicked that right. Yeah, Bo Svensson is still there. He came over, took over for a former Mainz player, took over when Mainz were bottom of the league and really completely turned the team around, I think 3 seasons ago, or that was 2021-22 season. And then had a really good year last year. I don't expect that to change. They did bring in Angelo Fulgini from Ligue 1 for last season, but he didn't play much, and he moved back to France. Aaron Martinez moved and left to Genoa in Italy. Marcus Ingvartsen, who is a good goal scorer, he's gone down. Someone paid 3 million euros to get him into where is he? Into Nordsjælland. So that's probably Ingvartsen going back to his homeland, but they paid $3 million or euros. That's a lot. Ronald Pierre Gabriel has gone on a free transfer to FC Nantes, which isn't a huge surprise. And Finn Dahmen has finally left goalkeeping, who's trying to win that top job at Mainz, but never really got it. He's moved now to Football Club Augsburg, and I don't see that as a huge loss. Now, they brought in, Mainz have Tom Kraus from RB Leipzig, but who was on loan playing at Schalke last season, paid 5 million euros for him. That's a lot, though they did get almost a little bit more than 10 from selling Ingvartsen and Fulgini. They have a lone center back, Sepp Vandenberg from Liverpool. That says something, and I wonder if Jurgen Klopp is trying to get him some experience from one of the clubs he used to manage, play for, et cetera, et cetera. Brought in a goalkeeper from a club I don't recognize, and then it looks like they upgraded a center back or promoted him from a lower division team. My question is about the availability of Jonathan Burkhardt, who's one of the best players, and I think was a German youth under 21, huge goal scorer. He missed a lot of last year with an injury. It looks like he had knee surgery. He's expected back in October. Until that happens, they're going to be relying on Onisivo, who's so physical, and also Ludovic Ajorc, who's came over from the French league, I think it's Strasbourg, and is a gigantic force. And they're just basically going to push you around. And that's kind of my read on Mainz, that they're very, very strong and kind of brutal, blunt force trauma. That's what they're inflicting on their opponents. Jae-Sung Lee is still around, the Korean, who can score a ton of goals. It's going to be important. I do think they're going to miss Ingvartsen, though, unfortunately. Tom Kraus is a good player, was in the Schalke team a lot last season, though they didn't have much around him. Really been impressed by Leandro Barreiro as well. And Dominic Hardcore, as they call him. Just Core is his name, but Hardcore is his nickname. That should be interesting. Sylvan Widmer, who plays for Switzerland, their captain, looks like he's injured or has picked up an injury coming into the year. That's a question mark. And what I've kind of found with Bo Svensson is that he kind of pulls out fullbacks and turns them into center backs, and then really not much is lost when he brings them in there. Because I had some questions about the defense. Edmilson Fernandez, who I think plays for the Swiss as well, he was actually very good when taking over one of the 3 center back roles last season, as well as Andreas Hans Olsen has moved in, Norwegian. And I think there's a lot in this team. Maxim Leish, I don't really remember. I feel like he was on another club last year, but I don't see a designation here. Stefan Bell is very solid. So, and Zentner, their goalkeeper, was very good. Had a hilarious blooper from a few years ago of kicking the penalty spot, thinking it was the ball. But came through that, 28 years old, worth 5 million euros. I'm a believer that he should have kept that job. Finn Dahmen did not deserve it. So they should be pretty talented. And I feel like they are way lower on this list than I was expecting, which maybe means that there's been a lot of expenditures elsewhere. So next I'll move to Football Club Augsburg, who are, as I can't stop getting hit up on WhatsApp at this point, I guess. Sorry if you're all hearing that in the background. But Augsburg at 123 and change million euros in terms of squad value. It's more than Mainz by about 7 and change. They're not a good club and are definitely to be one that I expect to fight relegation. And Richo Maassen is still around, 39 years old, came in and was pretty good with Augsburg. I think a lot because of the press that he developed, because they don't have a lot of talent and they've got to figure out how to score goals. And that's really the biggest question. They ended up selling Ricardo Pepi, the United States international, who came from FC Dallas here right near in my backyard. Sold him for 11 million euros, but bought him for 20 million dollars, I think. So that probably didn't go very well, but he's now at PSV Eindhoven and they can stop worrying about that. Maurice Malone, they also sold to Football Club Basel, 2 million euros. Don't really know him though. Rafael Gifkovitz, who's their goalkeeper, has left, which was a little bit contentious, and they kind of held him out towards the end of the year, despite fighting relegation because they didn't want to pay a bonus structure or something like that. Andre Hahn has left without a club, so we'll see if he comes back. But they've, I guess, permanently kept Mergim Barisha, who come over from Fenerbahce and was a very good, important player for them last season. Tim Breithaupt they brought in as a defensive midfielder from Kaiserslautern. Don't know him yet. Patrick Pfeiffer, a free transfer, and also Philip Tietz, a center forward. They paid 2.2 million for from Darmstadt. So picking off some of the best players of the teams that are coming in. And then Finn Domino, I've already mentioned as a goalkeeper, will probably be a solid contributor, but really hasn't played much in his career. So hard to know how good he will be. Sven Michel is in the squad. I mean, there's just a lot of doubt for me in this offense. Ruben Vargas still around, who's got a lot of pace in him, but really hasn't done a lot with that over the years, unfortunately. Eldis Rexrajai always wants to get in a fight or yell at the refs. He's there. Rafael Famberger has come back from loan, but he's out for a while with a knee injury. Gumni, and I mean, it's Pavleo's still on the squad and looks like he is injured. I guess he'd run out of contract, but is coming back. Reese Osford's injured. I mean, there's a lot of injuries in this team, and that is a big concern for me because they can't score goals. So if their defense is going to have some problems, that's going to be a lot worse. Next, we'll move to TSE Hoffenheim, who had one of the worst seasons around last season, I think, based on expectations. We're expected to be a potential European challenger, but honestly, we're fighting relegation for a lot of the season. They're worth about 131 million euros to be exact, and so that puts them further up the table, about 8 million, 7.5 million higher than Augsburg. Hoffenheim were a great offense, brought in. Kind of panicked their manager, brought in Pellegrino Matarazzo, American, who had just been fired from Stuttgart. He kept them in the league, and I guess that's what his job was. When I look at their squad, they sold Christoph Baumgartner to Leipzig, which is a big loss for them. He was a huge goal scorer for him. Stefan Posch had already moved to Bologna, but that was captured or finalized. Munas Dabur, a striker, one of their rotated strikers up top. Shouldn't be a huge loss. And then other names that are not worth mentioning. They did bring in Attila Jaloi from Fenerbahce, who's center back, I think plays for the Hungarian national team. I think I saw live in Germany last year. Wout Weghorst has come back from Burnley. They paid $1.5 million euros to loan him from Burnley, which I mean probably fits. He's a Bundesliga player and was really good in the past. We'll see if he can get that going, and did seem fairly serviceable in the English Premier League at Manchester United last year, and has played a fairly decent role for the Orange, the Dutch national team. Florian Grillitsch has come back on a free transfer from Ajax after leaving the league for a year in the Bundesliga, so that's kind of romantic. Marius Bulto has left Schalke 04 as a left winger, and there's some talent there too, and they also spent 1.5 million euros on a Paderborn attacking midfielder Julian Justvan, who I've not heard of before, but so that's some good sign. I mean, they've brought in some talented players. Still have Andre Komaric, the great Croatian. Ilas Bebu was one of the fastest players on the wing, or was at least trying to play on the wing as opposed to center forward, try to get on the pitch. They do have a fair amount of talent. I feel like they've replaced more than they've lost, so that's a good sign. See what they can get out of Robert Skov this year. And really, I think they're going to do the same thing they've done in the past, which is try to be a more attacking, goal-scoring type of offense. It didn't really work last season, but that could certainly change. There's some big questions there in their defensive three center backs. They need to stop making big mistakes. And Oliver Baumann, I think, had a pretty good season last year, their captain and goalkeeper. And we'll see if he can do that yet again. Next, I'll move to VfB Stuttgart, who are worth about 135 million euros, pretty close to Hoffenheim, but getting higher up in the table. Stuttgart are managed by, let's see if this would load, by Sebastian Hoeneß, whose father, I think, was a bigwig at Bayern München, might still be, but he came over and was I think the third manager of last season. And then in terms of departures, they've lost Tanguy Koulibaly, who I think is probably still figuring out where he's going at this point. Also lost Florian Müller, who had left, and it looks like to my kit that I'm wearing, to Freiburg, which is good for them because he played really well for them when they needed a goalkeeper, and they loaned him out, I think, from Mainz a couple of seasons ago, and played great for them. So he's probably a backup goalkeeper, or maybe he's going to potentially take that starting job now that Flecken has left, but we'll get to them in a second. In terms of rivals, they signed Serhou Guirassy from Stade Rennais last season in the French league, but did that and signed him to a long-term deal, even if they were going down to the Schweizer Liga when they're in the playoff for the relegation playoff or promotion playoff, depending which way you're going to look at it. They also have loaned Denis Undav to Brighton, who was there last year. They've they got Undav from Brighton, which is actually a pretty good grab because Undav was starting to look like he might be a big player for Brighton. Paid 700,000 euros for it, so that's pretty significant. Also have Alexander Nubel has come back, who was on loan from Bayern Munchen to Monaco and has come back for €1 million, another big loan expenditure. Wu Yonjong, who came over from Freiburg, is a good player, certainly has a lot of talent, can create up front, and then also brought in Jamie Llewellyn from Football Club Union as another 200,000 loan fees. So they spent a lot in loan fees, almost $2 million there, plus at least it looks like 12 or so in transfer fees. So they spent some money. That's should be expected. Stuttgart are one of the biggest clubs in Germany, but they've not really had a ton of success lately. We'll see what that does. I think my biggest questions will again revolve around their defense. But to be truthful, Stuttgart's scoring was their biggest problem, I think, for the last few seasons. They've got a lot more depth. There's a lot of talent this side. Wataru Endo is their captain, 30 years old now, Japanese, is awesome and really important to them. There's a lot of injuries on this roster. Bunch of players they brought in that are fairly well-known names. It's going to be up to Honus to put them all together. And this looks like a decent club, though, with Nubel at goalkeeper, should be pretty solid. I love Mavropanos, so he definitely has some big mistakes in him from time to time. This should be a much better club that doesn't need to fight relegation every year, but it's probably a good idea to keep an eye on them because we saw Hertha Berlin go into the relegation playoff last season and then get relegated when the season finished. Or 2 seasons ago, they got relegated in the playoff, or just got relegated flat out. So that sort of thing might happen again this year. And Stuttgart would be on that list, though they've spent enough that I don't think that should happen. Next, I'll move to Sport Club Freiburg, who I'm wearing the jersey for. They are worth nearly 166 million euros, which is kind of hilarious because they're a selling club. And they basically just push out whatever they get or whatever they have. I think Christian Streich has been manager since 2012, has no expiration date in his contract, basically lifetime deal, which is awesome and hilarious at the same time. He seems like a weird guy, but certainly gets a ton out of his squad. They did a lot of selling to Brentford this year. Kevin Schade, who left in the January window. Mark Flecken this summer, their goalkeeper, though he definitely had some big mistakes in him. So I'm not sure that's a huge loss. And they seem to just be a puppy mill for goalkeepers. Honestly, Freiburg have been great. They sold their last goalkeeper, Alexander Schwolo, and he's part of why Schalke got relegated last season. And Hertha also got relegated as the 2 teams he played for after leaving Freiburg both went down. Wu Yongjong, I think, will be a loss up front, attacking midfielder. Lino Tempelman was not really an important player. He's moved on to Schalke in the lower division, and Niels Peterson retired, so that was expected. They brought in Junior Adamu, who's from Salzburg in Austria, the Red Bull team, which is saying something. Paid 6 million euros for him. That's kind of expensive, but I guess I'm surprised Leipzig would let that happen to another squad in the Bundesliga, but I guess that shouldn't be that surprised because they got 6 million euros for it. Florian Müller, as we just said, can't come in to play goalkeeper again. That's pretty important. And then it looks like Jordi Malkengo and Max Rosenfelder are other potential arrivals, but they were from, looks like, the junior teams. I mean, the squads looks fairly similar, not a lot of big changes. The jersey I'm wearing, Vincenzo Grifo, is going to be an important goal scorer for them. They're going to be balancing Europa League again with their commitments in the Bundesliga, which is going to be a question mark, and we'll see how they balance it. But they were so good with that last year, a lot because of their defense, but we'll see. Versus Duan has stayed around, worth 18 million euros now. Roland Shaloy, the Hungarian, worth 10 million. I feel like that number is going to go up. We'll see when they get Kofi Kere back from his, I think, ACL injury. But there's a ton of talent in this team. There's a lot of great continuity. You got Christian Gunter, their 30-year-old captain, still around. And they got Kevin Slaughterback, who came back from his loan to Bochum, played a lot for them and was important to Bochum and probably will be good for the squad. Plus a bunch of players that have come back, like Matthias Ginter and others in that nature. So this should be a good squad. They should be competitive again. And they're a team I'm looking to back as much as possible because they have been a huge moneymaker for me going down the line. Probably only superseded by Union Berlin in this league. Borussia Mönchengladbach are next, worth about $22 million more, 187 million euros, I should say. Gladbach have been a disaster. They are a big club, one of the most historic in the Bundesliga. Gerardo Solane has come in, 44 years old, an all offensive attacking guy. Did not have a lot of success and was came in and replaced a struggling manager at Leverkusen 2 seasons ago, and then got sacked last season. And it's partly because of what he was doing, but maybe it's just kind of what happens at the club. But now he's coming into Borussia Mönchengladbach after Daniel Falca has only lasted 1 season. Not a great sign, but we know how he's going to play, or at least I know that he will. A lot of players left. We got Thuram going on a free transfer to Inter Milan. That was bad. Remy Bensebaini also to Dortmund on a free transfer. That's bad. Jordan Bayer went for 15 million euros to Burnley. Not bad. It wasn't a huge portion or player to them. 15 million seems like a really nice piece of business. Jonas Hoffmann, who plays the German international, left for Leverkusen for 10 million euros, and Lars Stindl is left for Kaiserslautern because that's where he started his career. It's his hometown club or whatever in Germany. So those are some big names that they lost. Maybe Jordan Bayer, like the smallest of them, yet they got 15 million euros for him, which seems like a good bit of business. Now they brought in Maximilian Volba from Leeds, who've been relegated on loan. They brought in a Sparta Prague player, I don't know, center forward, Julian Weigl, was already there from Benfica, but they finished that loan. Frank Honorat has come in for 8 million euros from Stade Brestois. A good scorer, but ultimately not a huge danger man, maybe because of the squad he played for. And Robin Hack has come in from Arminia Bielefeld, a left winger for 1.1 million. I don't think he's a huge name. My biggest question is, are Borussia Mönchengladbach going to be treated like the good club that they are expected to be? And really, we're an awful team to bet, and really a great fade over the last few seasons. They still have Alassane Plea, who's a good goal scorer, but ultimately he's like Batman without Robin at this point, or vice versa without Thuram. Patrick Erman has never really played much. I mean, Frank Honorat's going to come in and it's going to have to get used to the Bundesliga very fast. Hannes Wolf is there, but hasn't really done much in his career. Manu Kone, we'll see. He's probably a player that's going to get sold worth 40 million euros at this point. His knee injury is expected to return in September, so that's going to be a loss for a little while. Christoph Kramer's got an injury. Stefan Leiner as well. I mean, just Galley at the Americans, so that's like a name but I don't know that he's been great as a defender. Volber's going to come in and probably have to play right next to Elvedi, and they're going to have to play well. And I don't know if I trust that to happen. Also, when they sold Jan Sommer last season, they brought in Jonas Omlin from Montpellier in France, and he's a good goalkeeper, but is going to, I think, be under a lot of pressure this season because Gladbach is going to basically be rebuilding. So I'm not a believer in them. I don't know that I'd tip them from relegation possibility, but I wouldn't be shocked if they were in that fight, just based how bad they've been recently, and they've gone through a ton of changes. Next, I'll move to Union Berlin, who are in Champions League, if I'm not mistaken, worth over 200 million euros now, which is incredible considering they were taking plasma donations from their fans to build a stadium and letting the fans build it. Urs Fischer, their manager, been there since 2018. He's also got no expiration date in his contract. He's been awesome and is someone that I have made a lot of money on, probably a better way to say it. And I love him forever. His departure is Martin Torsby. Was a backup midfielder, not a huge loss on loan to El Grifoni, Genoa in Italy. Jamie Lewelling, who I mentioned, is on loan to Stuttgart, not a huge loss. Paul Seguin has left midfield for Schalke for 750K, which is surprising that a team going down to the Schweizer Liga is spending that much on a player, but here we go. They got some free a loan transfer left, and Pushas, also Ostunali, left as a free transfer to Hamburg. I mean, not huge cuts, not a lot of surgery there. They brought in Brendan Aronson on loan from Leeds, who's a great attacker, and I thought should have played a lot more for the United States in the World Cup, but did not. Diogo Leite, who came over from Porto last season, they spent 7.5 million euros on. They paid 13 million for Robin Gosens from Inter Milan, who's welcomed back to Germany, his native homeland, and should be a great player who really just didn't get enough time once he left Atalanta for Inter. Love that move. David Datro Fofana on loan from Chelsea, a young player, center forward. And then Lucas Toussaint, who came up and kind of switched over Berlin, I guess, from Hertha to Union, will probably be accepted with open arms. That will be probably a little awkward at first, but Hertha went down and he's staying in the league and switching to a much better squad. So same story. You should expect Kevin Volland also coming in from Monaco. I mean, these are some great moves. I love it. They paid $4 million for a year. I don't know why he didn't show up on the list. Geraldo Bacca's still there. My probably favorite player on the team. Also, big fan. Some of the ESPN commentators here in the U.S. Alexander Swallow, I mentioned earlier, from Freiburg, who left for Hertha and also to Schalke, and both got relegated last season. He's probably going to be a backup behind Frederick Rono, which he's been good in his role. 31 years old, a lot older than I expected, though. So we'll see how that ends up going. But it's going to be a big question how they balance two competitions. They were not good balancing competitions in previous seasons, but they're a really good squad. They're going to play really defensively against everyone, and I love them as an underdog. Don't really like them as much as a favorite. Next, I'll move to Wolfsburg, who have Niko Kovac still around, former manager of Bayern München and Monaco, amongst other places. He did a lot. I think he had a really great run into the World Cup last year, and that break came at like the worst time for them. Unfortunately, they sold Mickey van de Ven to Tottenham, who's already starting in their center back rotation for 40 million euros. Felix Mecha to Borussia Dortmund for 30 million euros. And then lost Marmoush on a free transfer, Paulo Otavio on a free transfer. Otavio less important. Pongracius to Lecce, not important, but somehow got 1.6 million euros for it. Whatever. Bringing in Lovro Mayer was impressive to me. Great player, Croatian, who was playing at Stade Rennais. Joachim Male also coming in from Atalanta. It was a big purchase that I think just happened. Moritz Jens, who's coming from Lorient but was playing at Schalke, and really revitalized that defense halfway through the year when he came in. And then Thiago Tomas, who was on, I think, loan from Sporting Club Lisboa, Portugal, from Lisbon. He was on loan at Stuttgart and now is in this squad that has really been made a lot better, which is interesting because I don't think Wolfsburg are playing in Europe. So that's a very interesting team that might go a lot higher than expectations would suggest. They struggled a little bit to score goals last season, but I expect that to be a better thing for them this year in a second year under Kovac. Con Castells is one of the best goalkeepers out there and might fill in for Courtois for the Belgian national team when he's not there. I'm very interested in seeing how this defense kind of gels together because they were not allowing anything for a period last season, and to see if that continues. Next, move to Eintracht Frankfurt, who are worth just, it looks like 2.75 million euros. So 270, almost 276 million euros. There's been a lot of changes there. I'm kind of surprised to see that number so high, but so be it. They have Dino Topmola, their manager, who was just appointed in July. 42 years old. Don't know him. Was not with the club last year. As that was another guy that I can't remember his name, but they got to Champions League and won the Europa League final, and then they just wouldn't want to commit to him because they performed pretty poorly in the Bundesliga 2 straight seasons. I don't know. Go figure. Departures, they lost Evan Ndika on a free transfer, which is hurtful for these type of clubs that need money, to Roma. They also lost Daichi Kamada to Lazio for free. That hurts. Jibril So, their central defensive midfielder, is very important. Lost for 10 million euros to Sevilla. A goalkeeper for 4 million to Ajax. I don't know a ton about, and that's about it. They brought back Robin Koch from formerly of Freiburg, who moved to Leeds in the Premier League, but they got relegated. Elias Skiri was a great addition to play in central defensive midfield from Köln. Also paid $9 million for a center back named William Pancho. Don't know him. Junior Dina Mbembe was already in the squad, but they, I best paid the 6.5 million euros to keep him from Paris Saint-Germain. And Ugo Larsson paid 9 million, central midfielder from, I believe, somewhere in Sweden. It looks like from Malmo. Yeah. So they've done some business. I'm kind of surprised to see them worth this much, though, to be frank. Colomani's still around, worth 80 million euros. We'll see how long he stays. Probably a big deal. They even kept him. But it's going to be important for Lindstrom to do something for them this season. He was so good until he got injured, and then things kind of went downhill. I love that Skiri addition. I've said a bunch of times already in this podcast. They got Hasebe, 39 years old, still in center back, with hopefully a more experiential type of role rather than expecting to start and play a ton. But Robin Koch coming in, he was pretty good in the Bundesliga a few seasons ago. Tuta I really like, especially he's very athletic. And the new addition that they spent 11 million euros for it looks like a Ecuadorian, I think. Ecuadorian William Pacho, 21 years old, from someone from Royal Antwerp in Belgium. So they've invested. Kevin Trapp, still goalkeeper there, formerly of Paris Saint-Germain, and is a good player on the German international squad, German national team, however I should say that. It's going to be interesting though to see if they can really deliver on being fifth most valuable of the clubs in the Bundesliga, because they haven't performed that way in the past. Next, I'll move to Leipzig, who just as I said, won the Super Cup in Munich and was pretty dominant with it. Though Bayern do look like they're in flux at the moment. Leipzig, a big jump, 125 million euros from Eintracht Frankfurt at 276 to Leipzig at nearly 407. A little surprised to see them fourth on the list, but I'm a believer in Leipzig. I've really loved Marco Rose, a Leipzig man or boy, whatever, grew up there. They've done a great job with this club and bringing a ton of money and kind of replacing players with better ones that are younger or better ones for the cost that fill in right away. Josko Variol leaving from Manchester City is probably the biggest name that's gone, and that's going to hurt. But then Christopher Nkunku, also with all the goals he scored last year, I got 150 million from those two in the Premier League. Also Dominic Szoboszlai for 70 million, which is surprising to me. I don't think he's worth that much, but like Liverpool seem like they're in love with him already. Lost Konrad Leimer on free transfer, who is going to be a big loss for their pressing scheme, left for Bayern Munchen, and also loaned out Andre Silva to Real Sociedad, which is a little bit surprising because he was someone that I thought would be kind of the backup striker or one of those that played a lot, but could see he was frustrated with the lack of minutes he had last season. Anyway, arrivals, they brought in Yavi Simons from Paris Saint-Germain, who had previously played for a bunch of Dutch teams, Dutch national team. I really like the Lois Openda signing from Lens for almost 39 million euros. Castello Luqueba from Lyon for 30 million euros. Center back is great. Sesko, I like. Center forward, 24 million euros. And Christoph Baumgartner, I already mentioned. There's probably some more in here. They've done a lot of selling, but a lot of buying. I like what they're doing. I like the idea here, and I feel like they can challenge even before the Super Cup. I felt like they could challenge Bayern and the rest of the league, and I think they can still do it. The question is, though, can they get over the hump? And that's not something they've ever really been able to do before. But really good squad. They seem to have some questions about when Gulashi will return, their captain and goalkeeper, 33 years old, coming back from an ACL. It might be Janis Vlahovic for a while, but he played for a lot last season and did fine, I thought. Next up, above that, I'll go to Bayer Leverkusen. They are at 429.5 million euros. I'm surprised to see them third, as I said. But you know, they've got some work to do, I guess, under Xavi Alonso, who they I guess opened the purse for this season. They sold Diaby for 55 million euros, sold Mitchell Bakker for 10 million euros. They're an all offensive team. We'll see if they add a little bit more defense into them. Demirbay left to Galatasaray for 3.7 million. They had a free transfer of Paulinho, who had been trying to leave for a while, so that doesn't say much to me. And Dele Sinkgraven has left as well, but that again doesn't mean much to me either. They brought in Alejandro Grimaldo, a left back who played a fair amount for Benfica and their Champions League teams. Victor Boniface from Union Saint-Gilloise, who have mentioned and literally been rated, it seems, across Europe, but especially in Germany. Granit Xhaka came back for 15 million euros from Arsenal. Jonas Hoffmann, who I've mentioned, a German international from Borussia Mönchengladbach, that helps. And Artur, a $7 million right back. I don't know him from before, but that's a fair amount of money from America, wherever that is. So when I look at the squad, I mean, always questions about the health of Patrick Schick, who's so good when he's playing, but is not playing very often. That does give me some questions about how they're going to replace Moussa Diaby, because unfortunately he's so pacey and really created a lot of goals just based on his speed. They seem to be a lot better defensively, though, and maybe that's a little bit more of a reflection of the team that Xavi Alonso was really coaching, because he was coaching this Real Sociedad junior or second team, Real Sociedad 2, I think it was. Frimpong is still going to be a great attacking right back. We'll see really what he does, though, and how they balance a couple competitions, because I'm pretty sure they're in Europe as well. I mean, there's some good questions. Lucas Sordetsky has some really bad times across. They have no real good backup keeper. They've got really bad ones that are all somehow getting paid, it seems to me. So those are questionable. But ultimately, if Radecki can stay healthy, then maybe this team can be a little bit better defensively, though it does seem like there's a big transition from the goal scoring only team that they were in the past. Next, I'll move to Borussia Dortmund. And they are worth 461 million euros. And then there's a huge gap to nearly 1 billion at Bayern Munchen. Wow. But anyway, Borussia Dortmund, they have Edin Terzic back again. Not really sure what he does besides, I guess, being an emotional Dortmund guy, but they sold Jude Bellingham for 103 million euros. Rafael Guerrero left to Bayern Munich on a free. Mahmoud Dahoud left on a free. Those two guys, I think Guerrero is more important. Dahoud hadn't played a lot last season. Ansgar Knopf has completed his transfer to Frankfurt. That was a while ago. Tom Roth had left as left back or is on loan in a lower German team. But they brought in Mecha for 30 million, brought in Rami Bensebaini, who's a good left back, and I think will help them. Good attacking potential, but also played a lot of center backs, so should help with a pretty weak defense. Marcel Sabitzer, 19 million euros for Bayern Munich, or from Bayern, but was on loan for Manchester United and finally might find a place to play. That's all important stuff, but really didn't do a ton of buying, but they're also known for their development of players and their youth team. So maybe not a big deal. The collapse last season when they were like a 2.25 goal favorite to win the Meisterschaft, all they had to do was win. They couldn't do that. It was pretty embarrassing. And I do wonder how that's going to impact them if they're in a title race this season. I don't think it's going to be good because Bayern are used to winning and they know how to do it. And this team clearly does not. But they're young, they're talented, they got a lot of good players. We'll see if they can turn in another good season. I can't imagine they'll be as good as last year, though. So I'm kind of a seller on them. And last but not least, Bayern Munich, worth 981 million euros. Really didn't get much for that. Barely survived to win the league last season. Were embarrassed in their Super Cup. I wonder if Thomas Tuchel will last very long. Amazing to me that they got rid of their previous manager so quickly. And honestly, there's so much dysfunction in their front offices that it's really not a good look for Bayern, especially as what should be a huge favorite in the Bundesliga. They lost Lucas Hernandez, who left to Paris Saint-Germain, but is also, I think, rehabbing a knee. Sadio Mane has left to Saudi Arabia, but won't be punching Sané in the head this season, hopefully. They sold Sabitzer, but he was already not part of their plans. Alexander Nubel to Stuttgart, but he was already on loan out anyway, or he's on loan again now. And then they sold Jan Sommer to Inter Milan as an Onana replacement. But I mean, that's all reasonable. I mean, I don't want to get too far past. I mean, the Harry Kane addition is going to be huge. He's a great goal scorer. They needed a center forward last season, though Eric Choupo-Moting did pretty well in his position, just was not healthy and was not able to play that much. Also, the Min-jae Kim, or Kim Min-jae, as I think is a better way to say it, center back from Napoli, who just took the Serie A by storm and really looked like Napoli might have been the Champions League favorite last season if he had stayed healthy. Or really the team had stayed healthy. But that's 150 million euros they spent right there with those two. Konrad Laimer for free was pretty big, as well as Rafael Guerrero, who's going to weaken both Leipzig and Dortmund in their attempt to catch up to them. Never a problem for Bayern to score goals. They're a hard team to bet against because they can really dominate and destroy a lot of teams. They do have some bad times, though, unfortunately. They do have some times where they look really, really average, despite being like ridiculously more highly valued squad. I'm gonna try to do a better job of predicting when those things are happening. It's really sweet to bet against Bayern Munich, but it is one of the most difficult things for me because when you're watching it, you just know it can go bad so quickly. I don't really believe in Mathis Tel, but like luckily he's not going to have to do too much. Harry Kane's going to take that job over. We'll see if Thomas Muller, what he can do as a second striker at 33 years old. I mean, there's a ton of great players in this team, obviously. What they can get from Musiala with a better defender behind him in the midfield with Laimer likely lining up directly behind him in the hole. I mean, there's so much on this team, and there's so much to them. But the big question is they were so bad last year. It looked very dysfunctional previously. No guarantee or lack of a guarantee that might happen again. Might see a lot of dysfunction one more time. So now I guess we're moving into the best bet portion of the show. Thanks if you've been sticking with me so long. I always appreciate that. Trying to find, if you're watching on video, this sunlight is really impossible to manage in my apartment right now. But regardless, let's see, where did the Bundesliga odds go? That is what I swear I just pulled up, but we'll go in there. I think there were 5 different categories, which is pretty good because some of the other leagues really haven't had much to even discuss. But where did this go? I just had it up. But anyway, okay. So I'll be there in 1 second. Thank you for your patience. Considering you've been with me, listening to me try to pronounce German words this whole time, I feel you're probably sticking with it if you want to get a best bet out of here. But holler if you don't enjoy my pronunciations or need me to get better. I'm working on it. I can promise you that. Okay, so here we go. We have odds to win the Bundesliga. Bayern München minus 370 favorites. So $370 bet wins you 100. That's a lot. Dortmund next favorite at 475. I'm not interested in. They could do it, of course, but I just don't believe in them. Leipzig at 12-1, despite being the fourth most valuable team in the league. It's interesting with Leverkusen at 40-1. I don't know. Transfer market seems to be a little bit off there, but who am I to judge? Actually, I'm a better, so I'm going to judge it. Leipzig at 12-1 looks the most interesting to me from that list. Union, I don't think can do it 100-1. Eintracht Frankfurt 100-1. Don't think they can either. And we'll go on from there. Now, odds to win without Bayern München, we have Borussia Dortmund at minus 115, Leipzig at plus 240. Someone's could probably do the math for me and tell me how different those two are. I do feel like, considering how Bayern don't look like a team, even with the addition of Harry Kane and Kim Min-jae, they don't look that dominant. So 12-1 on Leipzig, I feel like it looks very interesting to me, and was something I was kind of lining up before the season came about and before they sold Josko Vardiol, unfortunately. But those, again, interested there. Leverkusen down to 7-1, but still, that's, I mean, what are they giving? 18% odds for, or excuse me, even less, like 13% odds to win without Bayern München. I don't think Leverkusen have much of a chance, honestly. If they're going to be graded that way or rated that way, their team I want to bet against. To be relegated, Darmstadt minus 115. So it feels a little pricey, though. They look like the most likely to get relegated. I don't know how this is graded if they go to the relegation playoff, but I imagine that means finish in the bottom two, because we got Darmstadt minus 115, Heidenheim minus 105. So those are the two favorites and the two least valued squads. Bochum at plus 190 feels pretty large at almost 2-1. But I would need to look at and try to get some rulings on how that all fits. Augsburg plus 225, not a huge shout. I think Stuttgart will be better. So 225 there seems a little low. Cologne at 5-1 odds seems interesting. Werder Bremen at 5-1. I'd love to see that number higher. And then as I get above that, I don't think there's a lot of teams that are at huge risk, though certainly anybody could get off to a bad start, and then everything goes downhill from there. I think Werder Bremen 5-1 looks very interesting to me in the relegation odds right there. But I think it has to be bottom two, so that's a big question. Now, top four finish. They're not offering anything for Bayern München there, but Borussia Dortmund minus 1250, Leipzig minus 300, Leverkusen minus 130, and then we get to Union Berlin plus 325, but they got to finish above Leverkusen. I don't think that's impossible, honestly. Frankfurt at plus 350 look interesting, though they've been so poor in the Bundesliga in the past. Freiburg plus 450, going to be balancing big competitions again. Borussia Mönchengladbach, I don't believe in. I do have some interest in Wolfsburg at 6-1 odds to finish in the top four. I don't think they have European, and they've spent a lot of European commitments, and I think they've spent a lot on their squad. So that looks interesting to me. And then top goal scorer, I don't really want to mess with, but Harry Kane probably should be a favorite. 1-2 odds, minus 200. So literally hasn't even played a meaningful minute yet and just jumps to the top of the line, which is kind of interesting. But hopefully you weren't playing top goal scorers before that happened, because I'm sure those odds changed significantly. So I think we're now reaching that point in this podcast where it's time to get in here and give everybody what they came for. So this is Betting the Pitch number 217 with your host, the real_G Warner, in a lot of sunshade at this point, wearing my Sport Club 5 jersey. And for my best bet, I'll actually check out in the description. There's a lot of links to affiliate codes, save yourself some money or get some extra bonuses. Regardless, this is the Bundesliga episode. We're about to start all 5 European leagues, and I got to give a best bet here. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go out on a limb. I know it seems crazy, but I'm going to take RB Leipzig 12-1 odds to win the German Bundesliga. I don't really fear Borussia Dortmund as much, especially after their collapse from last season. I think there's a ton of problems at Bayern München right now in the league, and that will be a big problem for them as they're still focused on the Champions League. Yes, they expect to win the Bundesliga as well, but Leipzig, I think, have a ton of talent. They always just restock with what they sell each year, and I think they've got a lot going for them where there's so many problems that the two clubs ranked above them. And that'll do it for this episode of Betting the Pitch. I'm your host, real_G Warner. Follow me on Twitter if you're there. If you're on YouTube, hit subscribe, Apple Podcasts, or on Spotify, leave a 5-star review. You got a question there, I will read it as soon as I see it. Slide some DMs, check out Patreon as well, patreon.com/thereal_G Warner. That's the best bang for your buck to get all my stuff for across all the sports I'm betting. And it's been a really good run in baseball, so I would suggest getting in there. Football's coming up soon, of course, and a really good soccer opening weekend. Hope to continue that as well. So thanks for the support as always. Check in wherever you want to, and would love to talk more. And we got the season's right here. I can't wait.